Welcome, everyone. My name is Daniel West. I'm the founder and CEO here at Panalyt. And today, myself and my friend and colleague Fede at PeopleOPTI are going to be talking about the Great Resignation, the big quit, as I've heard people referring to it. And as this process accelerates and spreads, because it is showing no sign of stopping, we're looking at how you can understand the drivers of attrition, understand so why we're seeing this level of exits, and what we can do to try to reduce it, and all through People Analytics, which is our focus. So how data can help us to avoid the situation of very high exits that don't seem to be really driven through the job content or what has been common drivers. It seems to be a genuine difference in why people are changing roles. Okay. So to kick off, just to introduce myself. As I say, my name's Daniel West. We set up Panalyt about 5 years ago after I spent about 20 years in in-house HR. I've worked at companies like Morgan Stanley, Apple, where I was the head of HR for Japan, and in the US for their US sales operation and the global online store, and most recently with Uber, where I was head of HR for the international business. And then I chose to focus on building Panalyt as I looked in the market several years ago and couldn't really see how the things weren't really getting any better for HR in terms of our ability to pull data out of systems and put it in front of our clients and empower managers with all the data that we hold in HR. HR was still very much a black box, and so now I'm really dedicated to getting HR in front of our leaders and stakeholders who can actually take action to help make people's lives and careers better. I'll introduce my friend and colleague, Fede. Go ahead, please say hi to everyone.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan, and thank you for the invitation. This is our first webinar during this 2022. So yeah. I hope this is the first one of the many that we are going to be having this year. And just as an introduction, my name is Federico. I am from Latin America. I live in Mexico, and I've been a people analytics practitioner for the last 8 years. I consider myself a dinosaur in the space of people analytics, and I have been helping companies implement operative models of people analytics and to solve business problems from this approach. And I am also the academic director of the executive programs of People Analytics at the Tecnológico of Monterrey, a university here in Mexico, and also in another university in Argentina called SEMA. So I am a little bit passionate about People Analytics from the consultative side, and also working with Panalyt from the tech side. So we are happy to share together, Dan, our experience and to talk about the Great Resignation, a topic which is right now a hot topic globally. And I hope we all enjoy this conversation between the two of us.
Thanks, Fede. Great. So this is a little bit of housekeeping for folks. We're going to try to leave 10, 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. Please do use the Q&A tool, the little button that you see on the Zoom control. It says Q&A, and you can type in questions there. And our colleague Yusuf might answer some along the way through the text, and we'll try to answer the questions at the end. We are going to share a recording after the event, so please don't worry about that. Okay, then let's kick off.
Let's start. So with Dan, we wanted to share how companies can address this global event, the Great Resignation, from a people analytics perspective. This is a human crisis that many companies are going through. So we wanted to share with you all our vision or our approach on how people analytics can help companies solve or attack this particular phenomenon. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to be sharing with you some context of the Great Resignation, what the stats are saying, what the numbers are saying about this phenomenon. And then what we are going to be doing is trying to share with you all how specifically Panalyt can help companies to address this challenge. So if we move down to the next slide, just to have a general perspective, last November, like 2 months ago, in the US specifically, pretty much 4.5 million people resigned to their jobs. And this is something unique in terms of a historical event. Just to give you like a perspective, Dan, this is 1/4 of Singapore labor market. It's huge.
Yeah, so it's an enormous impact.
And it's enormous. It's a very, very big number, and but it is the first time that this crisis is not originated within the companies. At the end of the dot-com crisis or the financial crisis, pretty much companies were laying off people out of the companies. But this time around, people are voluntarily choosing to leave the companies. And this is something new in terms of how HR department has to address this challenge, because people are saying, I don't want to work for you anymore. And that's it. That's the end of the contract in terms of how employees or the relationship between a company and an employee. So what we are seeing is not the cause, but the symptom. The 4.5 million people quitting is a symptom, it's not the cause. And this is like a real opportunity for companies to use data to try to understand the cause, the root cause of why people are leaving the company. And that's very interesting from a people analytics perspective. And that's something that I think HR department has a huge opportunity to, or an excuse to start getting value out of the data that has within all the systems and all the technologies, surveys, I don't know, Workday, success factors, or whatever terminology they have within a company. And if we move to the next slide, this is something that from the traditional perspective in HR, we have addressed many problems with a subjective matter. But this time around, we are not going to be able to improve or to solve this problem if we cannot truly understand why people are leaving the company. And that's something that's a huge challenge for traditional HR that we see every day. And this is a transformation that HR has to go through. And specifically because people or employees don't want to go back to 2020. Pretty much. We don't want to, we miss it, but we don't want to go back. So data is one of the strongest tools that we have to make it better decisions about what is the future of what is the future for our organizations and the future for how we want to manage people so they stay and they keep being productive in the different models that we are seeing, either hybrid, 100% remote, or going back to the office completely. And that's very interesting.
I think this is partly why, very much why, we're seeing such varied responses from different companies. In so many things in HR, we've used to kind of best practice, established practices. People at one point said, okay, pay for performance is the right way to go. And we very quickly sort of coalesced around, okay, this is what pay for performance looks like. And we understood what, we understood what D&I looks like and how we should be driving a diversity. And there's like a common voice and a common direction of the largest companies and forward-looking companies, etc. And you're just not seeing that around this issue, because you've got some companies saying, okay, everyone can work from everywhere, and a lot of companies say, no, everyone needs to be back in the office because that's when we were better, when everyone was back in the office, and everyone's looking at these extremes going, wait a minute, these aren't true. And then so a lot of companies are trying to work out a hybrid, but hybrid isn't, there's no clear definition of that. But also, so much of the discussion is around this in the office, out of the office, and I don't think actually all the data data around why people are leaving is actually about being in the office or not being in the office. They're much more qualitative factors than that. It's just that not having to work in the office and not having a commute and having to have a different relationship to your boss and different relationship to your job has made people think about work differently. But like companies are just don't know how to address this and are grabbing onto, oh, okay, be in the office or don't be in the office, or this is how we'll support hybrid working. It's very, very messy. And I think all we can do is focus on the data. What does the data actually show us? Because that's the only thing you can hang your hat on. Yeah.
When you don't have data, the temptation is either everybody come back to the office or to implement a 100% remote policy to work. So
it's anecdotal, or it's just the executive preference. So this is what we're hearing a lot from the banks, is the executives grew up being in the office and they think the office is the best way to work, and that's what they want everyone to do. And it's okay, that's just your past experience from 40 years ago. Does that, is that relevant to people, how people live now? So,
or copying a policy that, I don't know, a tech company implemented, and you don't know if it is going to be effective within your company. And that's very dangerous. And that's something that we are also seeing, and we need to be prepared to change our decisions in the future. I think that the pandemic, as you're seeing in the presentation, the pandemic has been a catalyst to elevate the personal purpose and values. And this is the human crisis that we were referencing back during the first slides, because when companies were implementing on designing the employee value proposition for their companies, before the pandemic, the perks and the benefits you were mentioning, the compensation package, that's the easiest thing to do and to implement. You can do a benchmark in terms of compensation. You can see how your competitors are. So you can, if you have the budget, you can increment or increase the budget a few percent. But what we are seeing is that compensation by itself is not enough. We are not going to retain our employees just with perks and a compensation. Employees after the pandemic, after we have put our lives at risk of making just small decisions, going to the supermarket was a high-risk decision a few months back. We are more picky in terms of who we want to work with. And that's very interesting. We are mixing our purpose, what we want in life. We are more self-aware of what we want. So companies have like a real challenge to redesign the EVP, to redesign what we are going to offer to our employees, to retain them so they can be happy, to be more productive, to work more in a more collaborative setting, regardless if it is 100% remote, hybrid, or 100% at the office. The EVP must change regardless of the work setting that we are going to be deciding that is best for our company. And that's interesting. That's new for many companies.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we wanted to share something that Gartner did that finished last year. These are five themes that you can work with to construct the EVP for your employees. And what we are seeing is that we are entering into an era of the hyper-personalized value proposition for our employees. And this is something very complex for many companies because you pretty much will have to build a value proposition for each employee. And you will need to give them what they want in order for them to be productive, very productive, and to stay in your company for many, many years. And in order to do this, you need data. You need to understand the patterns of behavior of your employees, because otherwise you're going to be designing just one or two or three employee value proposition that are standard for throughout the whole company, and that's something that is not possible, or it's not going to be enough for your employees.
It's not scalable. Yeah.
It's not scalable.
The only way to make these approaches to these 5 themes that you need to address, the only way to measure success and to actually lay out an action plan that is measurable and actionable is if you have data to hand where you can say, okay, what is the key KPI on our people data for these themes, and how do we empower managers to actually track their progress and success on this? Otherwise, you're just saying to managers, this is how your employees feel, and off you go. You're not giving your managers any tools or anything to be able to measure their success, except the kind of irreversible metric of people are walking out the door. And you really want to have metrics that are in advance of people leaving, not that being your only metric. If your only metric is attrition, then that's too late. You've already lost people, and then you're going to have to rehire, and it's a long, slow process.
Yeah, the reactive HR, it's an old-fashioned HR management system. And this has to change, and I think People Analytics here has it's a very powerful tool for HR manager or executives, because data can empower us, not only HR but also business managers, line managers, executives, to make different kind of decisions about how to manage people. And that's key. That's central for what is People Analytics, and what kind of value we can get out of this kind of analysis in terms of how we are going to give our employees what they want in order for them to be productive. And that's an essential part of the whole conversation. And I think you're going to be addressing this in a few more slides. But if we go to the next slide, I think this in relationship with what we were saying, is that implementing this kind of EBP requires data, requires descriptive, predictive, and relational analytics in order to make this kind of decisions, because otherwise we are going to be blindfolded making decisions that are not going to be effective, or that are not going to have the impact that we want to see in our business. So I think there are some essential business questions that we can address, for example, using Panalyt, and I think you can move to the next slide, Dan. Some of these questions I think are very relevant, or are going to be very, very relevant in the following months, and are related to how to construct an EBP that can balance the Great Resignation, or the impact of the Great Resignation. And that has to do with understanding what are the drivers, for example, of attrition, of turnover, and what we can do to hire or to attract the candidates that we need for the following months. And that's critical, because if we a bad hire, it's going to impact indirectly in the attrition rate. We need to understand how the new hires, or the people that are working right now in our companies, that's many of them were hired without knowing their boss, their manager, not even seeing, not even once face to face. And that's something new that we haven't seen this in history, at least. So you have, I don't know, half of your company with new hires that never seen each other. So how can we improve the patterns of collaboration? How can we improve collaboration within the different models that companies are implementing? How do we listen to our employees to translate that data into actionable insights to improve our business metrics? And how do we understand who are the influential leaders that create the most trust within employees, so they can be more effective managing people? And then this is a hot topic. How do we engage and empower our employees to do their job and to do it more happy?
And I think this is why this Gartner model spoke to us, but it's the result of surveys, obviously, and it's the result of employees' opinions on what is driving their behavior. But obviously, we think Gartner's very, very good at running these kind of surveys. But where it really speaks to us is, I think each of these items does speak to our anecdotal experience. Fede and I, we speak to HR professionals kind of all day, every day across the market, and these are the kind of topics that are top of their mind. But also, we're seeing it in our clients' data, and also how clients are starting to use our tools and the positive feedback that we're getting about them. So we're very much focused on practical people analytics, right? So how can you use people analytics for practical use? So we've been trying to interpret or operationalize some of these topics, and so translate them to, okay, how can you actually use our tools to support your growth in some of these areas? Obviously, you've got training and development resources and tools, or you'll have survey resources and tools, performance management and engagement tools that also will help you with pieces of this. But we think only a holistic view of people analytics will allow you to address all of them, or allow you to set, let's say, measurable metrics that will help you to address each of these areas.
And the idea is to empower not only HR, but also line managers to engage in different kind of conversations about what is going on within the company.
Yeah.
And I think this is something new for HR, because typically HR data was closed within HR walls. And I think the new era of HR is to democratize the data of people, not only the descriptive, but predictive or relational analytics, to every corner of the company, so companies could be more agile in terms of the decision-making process. And that's something very powerful that we are going to be seeing in any company in the future months. So that's interesting to address in the conversation.
Grand. Just a point of housekeeping, if folks have questions, we're going to try to leave 10-15 minutes at the end for questions. Please do put your questions into the Q&A, the little Q&A button you'll see there, and we can look at the questions. So do please type them in as you think of them, and then we can try to address them at the end. Okay, so let me jump onto the next slide. Oh, I think I've skipped one. Okay, here we go. Okay, so so on a practical basis, we want to talk through some of the tools within Panalyt, and this could be any analytics engine that you're using, but obviously we work for Panalyt, so we're going to talk through how you can use Panalyt. But I think that the same lessons should work for other tools that you may be using. And the point about Panalyt and how your people analytics structure should be set up is that you should be pulling data from all the different sources. The power of people analytics is when you can get all the data aligned and in one place, so that you can look at for example, you can look at your attrition data in the context of who are high performers, who are people with low or high engagement scores, what was the process of recruiting those people that have left. You can only understand attrition and people's attrition drivers, what's pushing them down the road towards leaving, if you have access to all the information. And so the first one we're going to focus on is this one on sort of bottom left on screen, communication data. So we spent a lot of our time during this COVID period really focusing on adding an additional data set to our existing core HR data set, where we have data from your HRIS, your recruitment tools, performance management tools. We've been focusing on adding into that the data from email, chat, and calendar tools. So we extract only the metadata. We don't look at content. We don't look at the actual text of email and chat. We only look at who from, who to, and the timestamp. And we think that's the right balance in terms of privacy considerations. We found that most employees, most organizations are comfortable with looking at the networks of behavior, and people are generally uncomfortable when you start analyzing actually what people are saying. Very powerful, but very unsettling to employees generally. So we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of tools that are helping us to understand some of these drivers using this tool in particular. So if I look at these three areas that I've circled here, how can I improve and understand patterns of collaboration? Are my employees engaged? And who are the influential leaders? There are many ways to look in the data for these 3 points, but the one tool that brings it all together is actually this tool on my background here. This network analytics engine. So I'm gonna just jump into our tool here. So I'll see if I can just replace this with the actual replace the slide with our tool. So I think you can, Fede, confirm for me. You can see I'm in the demo here. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I've jumped straight into this relational analytics overview. We call it the Explorer. There are many different ways to visualize this data, line charts, bar charts, tables, but this is kind of the this is the overview of how an organization is communicating. I want to stay logged in. So there are a number of tools that do network analytics. We're particularly unique in that we've combined this network data with people data. So something you're able to do is to filter the data by organization, by location, by employment type, by function, by gender, etc. So let's speak to one of these issues that we were drawing out, the understanding how managers are influencing, or how influential managers are, and how we can empower managers to understand their network and sort of who they are influencing. And what we know from our experience so far, putting these tools in place and talking to clients, is that senior leadership tend to significantly overestimate their network within an organization. Managers in large organizations assume, they feel that they communicate daily with people across the organization. Whereas when you use a tool like this, so we have this ability that we call layers. You can select any attribute of any of these employees. So here I'm going to choose job grade. So I'm going to look at this senior leadership, this C-suite, and this management group. And you can see that they're going to be highlighted. You can see these are the teal nodes in this pattern. I can zoom in a little bit. So you can start to see how the leadership are embedded within the organization. And by highlighting over them, you can see the network that they have. And you're able to isolate that, and you're able to see who they are connected with. So here you can see this is Ricky, who's a senior sales leader. And you can see who they're connected with. Kelly in design, and I've lost track of who that was. Elizabeth in marketing. So you're able to highlight who those leaders are. You're able to measure using these collaboration scores and tracking their number of relationships, number of connections, and you can analyze who they are connected with. And what you tend to find is that senior leaders tend to have good relations with their direct reports and with some other senior leaders, and really no one else in the organization. You also can use this similar analysis to look at cliques or silos. In many organizations, you find silos of people by location or by organization, or very often by tenure, that they joined at about the same time, or by gender. Unfortunately, you do see cliques of men, particularly, who will only have good relationships with men. And so you're able to understand how leaders are influencing their total organization. And when leaders have access to this information, they can take action on it. Once they actually understand their actual behaviors, that will help them to change their behaviors. So, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say then that for many companies that going through any change management initiative, or they want to identify who the informal leaders of the company are, this is a great tool to identify who they are. Because usually or traditionally, we tend to select these people by our personal relationships, but not necessarily are the influential leaders of the company. So trying to understand these patterns of relationships and who are building the strongest networks within a company can be very helpful. For example, there's a use case to select who are going to be the ambassadors of a change initiative within a company. So you choose those ambassadors based on who are the strongest nodes or people within a company.
Who has the connections across the silos.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Please.
No, so that's the other way of looking at this kind of data. So I've here selected your senior leadership on your org chart and showing them, are they well connected or not? Are they influential or not? Yeah, the other way is exactly as Fede is saying. You can use this tool to identify who has high relationship scores and what we call a high diversity of score. So their network is very diverse in terms of gender, age, tenure, organization, and location. So you can score people highly on their diversity of relationship score, and those are de facto your influencers. Someone was just asking, what are the green dots? The green dots, if you see here in the layers, in this case, it's I'm highlighting who is C-suite and who is management, and so they show up as green here. And you could do it the other way around, as Fede says. You could, using this layering tool, you could highlight who has a high relationship score, who has a high diversity of relationship scores, and then that will highlight the people who would be your high influencers. And you could identify who those people are because you just mouse over them and it'll tell you who they are, which is what makes this tool somewhat more practical than a lot of network analytics tools. I just want to show another use case of this. So a very practical use case has been looking at new hire engagement. So hiring people during COVID has resulted in a lot of turnover because as new hires come in, your whole onboarding structure has been built to assumes that people are in the office and that your new hires are going to get all the support from the people around them. Let me drill into just one particular team here. Let's look at just the design team and the design team as they speak to each other. So this is design communicating with other people in design. So rather than highlighting this group of senior leaders, I can remove that layer and I can add a new layer of tenure. And so what I'm looking at here is the new joiners into this team, and are they getting the kind of support that you would hope they would be getting? Are they getting the level of engagement with their colleagues that is going to keep those people on board? And the turnover of people hired during this new work from home period has been incredibly high. An average turnover in the US during this Great Resignation has been something like 53%. You're talking like 60, 70% of people that were hired during COVID. And so what this is doing, so the orange dot here is the people with 0 to 6 months. So you can identify these people, you can sort of pin who they are on here. So these are new joiners that are only connected to each other. Here's someone who's part of a very small organization. And so you can start to say, who should I be introducing Gerard, Daniel, and Hattie to ensure that these new joiners are actually bonding into the organization and have a level of engagement that will make them not just successful, but help them to stay inside the company. So let's look at someone like Michael, for example, someone who's highly connected, someone like Kenneth. And so you can start to introduce on a practical level, HR and line managers can start to introduce those at-risk new joiners to those longer tenure, larger networked colleagues. So that's a very practical use of this tool.
Not only to understand after the onboarding process started, but also can be very helpful before the onboarding process. Because if you analyze this team, you can pretty much see that this team doesn't have any strong relationship or patterns of collaboration. So if you are in HR and you can see where you're going to put a new hire within this team, you pretty much can predict that you're going to have an early flight or an exit from the company. So it can be very helpful to design with whom these new hires are going to be working, or you can select new people to do the shadowing process or to do the onboarding process more effectively, seeing the kind of relationships that you have within any specific team. And that's very powerful.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely true. You don't need to wait until they're on board to start doing this analysis. You can build your onboarding program using this analysis. Again, a very practical use case. Okay, so we should move on, as I realize there's a lot of time going, and we are. The next thing is looking at using those engagement scores on attrition risk. So we want to look at sort of who is likely to leave, and we're looking at two different tools within the system. So one is the network analytics tool that we were just looking at. So using network analytics, you're able to look at who has a sustained decline in the number of relationships. shows that people are having an active withdrawal from the organization, or indeed that they're being rejected from the organization. So where we see people's number of relationships going down, but actually where their average score stays relatively constant, that means that, yeah, that they're having a constricting and a reduced number of relationships, but they are maintaining good relationships with their 2 or 3 key friends in the organization. So the reason that you're looking at both those values, if someone's just literally just sick or just out of the office, you'll just see all of their scores decline naturally. But where you see people that actually are kind of doing their work, but are pulling away from the culture, you see that split in the behaviors, that the average score stays high, but the number of relationships goes down very rapidly. And this is an incredibly strong predictor of people leaving the organization. But what it doesn't show is particularly why. And then we have another tool that really looks at the why people might be leaving. So let me jump back into the demo and sort of show you our tool that helps you understand the why of predicted risk. So I can jump into this thing. We call it the Attrition Risk tool. Actually, I'm still filtered on the design team. I'll reset that in a minute. But so what this tool does is it looks at a population's historical exits, and we have a machine learning tool that looks at your entire exit history. And then we look at the total organization, their exit history, and we look at what are the attributes of the people that were leaving. So we look at 12 to 15 different metrics around age, tenure, gender, who a manager is, what organization they're in, how often have they changed organization, how often has their compensation changed, where does their compensation sit versus their colleagues, and so we look at a number of different metrics that's all data that you already have. None of this is new data. It doesn't require new surveys to be run. I'm sure any organization, anyone on the call right now, your organization has this data. It just may not all be in one place. So because we're collating the data, we can do that analytics, and then we come out with a risk score. And so what this is showing is risk over time, the last 3 months. We can use our time slider here to extend that period out. And you can see a trend in the likelihood of people leaving in the next 6 months. So as at March 2021, this organization as a whole had an average score of 85% likelihood of people leaving in this high and very high score. You can look at lower level levels of risk that'll lower your average in total, but most people want to focus on that high and very high risk area. So this is showing that percentage risk. You can look at it by any level of your organization or by any attribute, or you can see it in these charts. So you could start to drill down and say, okay, well, I want to look at this high area that's within marketing. Where are we seeing higher risk within marketing? Where are we seeing higher risk per location, by job grade, by gender, etc. So you can start to understand hotspots in terms of the total percentage risk, but you can also look at it in terms of the head count itself, and you can start to look at individual employee risk. So you can start to drill down to the individual employee level, and here you are. So you can start to see who these people are, but you can also see the drivers. And this is the really important part to make this a practical, actionable tool, is not just who has a high risk, but what is driving it. So we pick the top 3 drivers. We show you the percentage that driver is contributing to their overall score. So this person's overall score is 84%. So team size is contributing 34% of that score. Their team size is 49. So we tend to show that the very large teams and very small teams tend to drive attrition, at least for this organization. The percentage of women in the team, and this is a woman employee, percentage of women in the team, that does also tend to drive, a very low percentage of women tends to drive exits for women, and tenure. So this person's tenure is 2 years, and this organization has a history of losing people in that 2-year time frame. So this helps you to understand who is at risk of leaving and the why. And when you can combine this with the network data, you can understand you have a very high level of accuracy and being able to pinpoint who's leaving, and this will give you a very clear indication as to why they may be leaving. Although this tool generally has a lower accuracy, this tool averages at about 80% accuracy in terms of its prediction, whereas the network analytics can get to 90-95% accuracy, but doesn't tell you why, whereas this does tell you why. So this is a very powerful tool for understanding those attrition drivers. I'm actually conscious of time, Fede. I don't know if we should switch to the questions on this, but because
we have a few questions. Yeah, I think this is very interesting. I think this should be the last functionality, but then we can move to the questions.
Yeah, no, I think maybe that's where we should go, because I've spoken to the drivers of turnover. The listening to employees, we do have a tool within Panalyt that allows you to put your survey data into the tool as well. So we don't run surveys within Panalyt, but surveys are obviously an important, valuable part of your total data. What again we find is that survey data tends to stay siloed within its own tool, whatever tool you're using for surveys. And you may be putting some of your demographic data in there, but you're not getting that total picture of their compensation, who their manager is, how many, what level of change they've had in their structure, and also you tend to not have the when did people start working out of the office or not. Oh, actually, that's something I meant to say earlier. Sorry, I've just reminded myself. One of the critical things we're seeing in organizations that are getting this right are companies that are very accurately tracking when employees started working from home, when they started coming back into the office, and what their pattern is. And you might be surprised at how many companies have not been tracking that they went into COVID and people started working from home and they kept no record of that actually in their core system. And that's a shame, because obviously you really want to have that data, because it becomes an incredibly powerful predictive tool to understand who was working from home. And actually from now, as you're working hybrid, I think we're going to start to see a real difference between organizations where the manager's in the office and the employees are remote, or vice versa, or where they're both remote or where they're both in the office. I think that's going to play a really important role for analytics going forward. So I strongly recommend to people to be tracking that data point. Okay, so maybe we should jump into the questions, and I can jump into the tool if any of the questions relate to that. Any questions you're seeing that you want to grab there, Fede?
I think there is one question about collaboration, and I think when we are looking at Panalyt, of course, it's a tool that you can see the different modules or the different data from the different perspective of HR, but you need to have this more strategic view of the whole thing as the company as a whole. So, of course, it's very difficult to condensate all the data in one data or one KPI or whatever. But trying to understand a very complex organization requires multiple views of your data. And collaboration is one of them. And I think the module about how engagement, for example, can be interpreted from the collaboration data. That's very interesting, and that's a new approach to understand the level of trust and cohesiveness within a company, and that's something that it can be done with Panalyt.
Yeah, I agree. I'm seeing one question, a practical question about the attrition risk tool. I'll just share it again quickly. Someone was asking if it can be made to only display the areas of the organization that are high risk. And so, yeah, there is a toggle within the tool here. This top toggle is the default selection. So you can see it's just giving you an overview of the average risk value. This second toggle at the second toggle on the bottom separates out your head count by risk group. And you can use the pills here to add or remove certain values. It just, in this demo tool, there is no one in the very high risk category. It's just a factor of how the demo data set was set up. But you can see that red line is there flat on the bottom. But it does allow you, if you, let's say you just wanted to highlight the areas with high risk, you can select the pill just to that high risk group, and then you can see what the head count is in various teams. Also, you can use this drop down to look at any organization level or any location level, and it'll give you the percentage risk for each of those teams. So there's a couple of different ways for you to focus in on both the organizations and the actually also the managers and the individual employees at just high risk. So yeah, it's a very practical tool in terms of its ability to display, focus in and display on that information. So someone else was asking, have we tried introducing the collaboration analytics as a variable in that attrition risk tool? Yes. So you can use the two tools independently. You can use the network analytics and understand that risk driver, and you can use the tool I was just showing, the attrition risk, which is built on demographic data, compensation of manager, etc., organizational data, but then you can also combine the two. So for the clients that are using both tools, we take those collaboration score over time, number of relationships over time scores, and we can include those in the machine learning model. And so you can get a hybrid of the two behaviors. It does significantly increase the accuracy of the attrition risk tool, but again, the very fact that people have a declining number of relationships isn't a cause; it's a symptom. And so we are trying, in our attrition risk tool, we are trying to get to causes of risk, drivers of risk. But yeah, we can massively increase the accuracy by adding the two data sets together. And then again, key advantage of our integrated tool.
There is a question about what is the needed data to do the relationship charts or the O&A charts.
So it really, we get an API to either Microsoft 365 or to G Suite or to Slack, basically. Those are the three tools that we've used most commonly. There are lots of other collaboration or chat tools, and generally an API is available for those. It'll work the same way. But typically, we connect an API to those tools, and there's a way of configuring the API where we only get the who from, who to, and the timestamp, and sort of the message ID, the unique identifier of a message, so we can see when things are replied to. There are ways of configuring the API where we just do not get content, and that's how we always set it up. But yeah, simply it's connecting us to whatever tool you're using, and again, it's something that you're going into this potentially difficult period of increased terminations, and you think, okay, how do we start gathering new data to analyze? And our message is, you probably don't need new data. You need to use the data you have. And if you've been using Microsoft for 5 years, you've got 5 years of really, really rich data. And we can align that data to your HR data, because you'll have the employee ID in your HR data almost certainly. So you'll have the email address in your HR data, or it's very easy to populate. And then, of course, we can connect the two records using that. So you have this data.
Yeah, and also it's important to address that this is passive O&A. I don't know, Mauricio, if you're familiar with this, but this is data that it's gathered on a daily basis, pretty much. So we are focused on analyzing the metadata of the collaboration or the communication data. We are not, we don't analyze the content of the messages or the communication. And that's a good point to address in comparison to other tools that do active O&A.
I saw a question that was asking about the snowball effect of attrition, and that's a really, really, really good question. And again, this network analytics tool is incredibly useful for identifying that risk. So the snowball effect, the example that we all think of is a manager leaves, and then you see his team leaving because the manager has strong relationships and starts poaching their team across. But it's not only that, right? The people that you speak to on a day-to-day basis, the people that you collaborate with, when they start leaving, you start to question and say, wait a minute, they're all leaving. What do they know that I don't know? Why they're leaving? That's empowering me to leave as well. Even if your total attrition of your organization was relatively low, in that pocket will suddenly snowball and expand. And so when we do the attrition risk prediction, you can highlight that predicted score. So let's say someone scored at a very high risk. You can highlight that on this network chart. So show me the people that are at very high risk. You can see those people, and you can see who they're connected with, and that's going to give you an idea of the risk of those people as they're leaving. We actually have another interface for this same data, which is a more table-based interface, but allows you to look per individual who their key connections are and who else is connected to those individuals. Because if you have a strong influencer in the organization and they are really the only strong relationship to another individual, when that person leaves, that other individual is then isolated and then is much more likely to leave. Whereas when that influencer is connected to another influencer, two people with a large network, when one of them leaves, well, the other person still has a large network and therefore is at a lower risk. So you can start to look at imbalance of network size as an indicator that snowball effect is likely to happen. When a strong influencer leaves, that is going to influence a large number of people to think about leaving. So it's a great question, and yeah, that's one of the things that we're set up to help you with. Do you want me to answer that question at the bottom, to the new question that just came in about engagement surveys built to preserve confidentiality? Yeah, so all of our data within Panalyt can be set up that a user, whether it's every user, including the admin, or just specific users, can only see certain data if your cohort size is a minimum of 3 or a minimum of 5, and you can set what that minimum is. So that means that you can't drill down to the individual employee level. You can drill down to a cohort of, or you get the average score of 3 people or the average score of 5 people. That by default, that's how our survey tool is built, but any of the tools can be built that same way. So that attrition risk tool that we were just looking at, in the demo, you can get down to individual employee level. Most companies don't implement it that way, at least for line managers. Most companies have it so that you can only get to a minimum of 5, a cohort of 5. So a cohort could be the marketing team in Singapore with a tenure of 2 to 5 years. And that might be just 5 people. Or it might be less than 5 people, then you couldn't see it. And if it's just 5 people or more, you could see that value. So you'll start to apply more and more filters. You'll hit a bottom. But yeah, that's a very easy setup for us. But yeah, it's a good practical question. I think we're at time, Fede.
Yes, we are.
I hope people got a lot of value from that. It's always a lot of fun for us to discuss these topics with you, and it's great to see the questions. I like how really practical a lot of the questions are, because that speaks to how we think about things too. It's like, okay, practically, how do we help our stakeholders here? And so I appreciate that, and I appreciate you all joining. And thanks, Fede, very much for joining me on this topic.
Thank you, Dan, for the invitation, and thank you everybody for being here during this webinar. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, folks. Have a great day, evening, wherever you are.
Day.
Cheers, folks. Bye now. Bye, Fede.
Bye.